Hello, everyone, and welcome to the TMA's Ask the Expert podcast series. Today's podcast is entitled The Role of Nutrition in Managing Your Health. I'm Sam Hughes from the Conquer program at UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas, Texas, and I'll be moderating today's podcast. The TMA is a nonprofit focused on support, education, and research of rare neuroimmune disorders. You can learn more about the TMA at myelitis.org. This podcast is being recorded and will be made available on the TMA website for download via iTunes. During the call, if you have any additional questions, you can send a message through the chat option available with GoToWebinar. For today's podcast, we are pleased to be joined by Tad Campbell and Christopher Flores. Tad Campbell is a registered dietitian in Dallas, Texas. He's a faculty member in the Department of Clinical Nutrition at UT Southwestern Medical Center. In addition to teaching graduate students, he sees patients in an ALS clinic, the UT Southwestern Nutrition Clinic, and the Total Life Care Clinic at the Clinical Center for Multiple Sclerosis. Christopher Flores is a registered dietitian at Children's Health in Dallas, Texas. He has worked in pediatrics for the last 5 years. He started working in weight management and now works in the neurology department. His main focus is on the ketogenic diet and the medium-chain triglyceride diet. He's also a provider in the Pediatric Conquer Clinic at Children's Health. Welcome, and thank you both for joining us today. Now, before we jump into some of the specific questions that were asked by patients and other members of the community, I wanted to just kind of give you guys a chance to give a broad overview of what the current understanding is generally about nutrition and proper nutrition in a healthy diet. Kind of from both the adult and the pediatric perspective. So Tad, I'll just throw it over to you first, and if you want to kind of give us a broad overview of what our understanding of nutrition is currently, that would be great.
Sure. So, well, first, thanks for having us today. I think that maybe the first thing that you should think of when you think of nutrition is, and what's the best nutrition is really a balanced and varied diet. My Plate is the government program put out by the USDA that was once the 4 food groups and then the pyramid, and now we're at My Plate. But it does a really good job of providing a visual example of what your plate should look like, and you can sort of tell from the proportions on that plate kind of how it should flow into your real life. So, for instance, half a plate being fruits and vegetables. Keeping a quarter of the plate for grains and then making half of those whole grains, and a quarter of the plate for a lean protein, and then maybe a serving of dairy or a little bit of a healthy fat with that meal. By and large, that is sort of the way we should all be eating. But let's don't forget there are other things like hydration and weight management. Those are pretty important. They're important in general nutrition, but they're also very important in the world of neuromuscular diseases. And I'm sure we'll talk more about those here in a bit.
Yes, thanks for that kind of broad overview. And Chris, is there any other anything else you'd like to add, or any special considerations from the pediatric point of view in terms of diet and nutrition?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me as well. So along with Tad, it's pretty much somewhat the same as far as dietary goals for pediatrics. Balanced meals, plenty of fruits and vegetables. The main thing that I stress out is we got to start at a young age. It's easier to set good examples and good habits while they're young, because once they get older, it's going to be a lot harder to change those habits, those eating habits. So I always stress to my parents is that, always promote a balanced meal, always promote healthy foods. Just because they're kids, don't give in to all their wants when it comes to sweets or sugar beverages. That's all I have to add to that for right now.
Yeah. I think we all can take a note from the nutrition playbook about our general dietary habits. And a lot of the questions that came in from patients were in particular about their disease process. And we're working with patients who have these autoimmune, these inflammatory conditions of the central nervous system. And there's a lot of talk and controversy about what you should or shouldn't eat, what diets you should or shouldn't be on, if you have these disorders, or really any kind of disorder. There's a lot of talk out there, but I think that people are very confused about what might actually be scientifically valid versus what's just anecdotal, what's just talked about. And so there are a lot of questions that came in that were more specifically about what do we take home from this with as people who have some kind of inflammatory process going on that's having an effect on our neurological abilities. So from the nutrition and diet standpoint, are there any specific recommendations or even broad recommendations for people who have inflammatory processes going on or autoimmune diseases and how they can or can't affect that via diet? Tad, can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So what really we focus on and what we find being questioned a lot in neuromuscular disease population is what can I do to deal with kind of these major things like fatigue and inflammation. So yeah, I can tell you broadly what we can do, and we can dive in as deeply as you'd like for each of those. So if you think weight management, fatigue, and inflammation, those are like the three things that we hear the most about, the three things that we can most affect these diseases with diet. But there are other things to manage as well. So if you have comorbidities like diabetes or hypertension, or if you've got elevated cholesterol, those need to be dealt with as well. But those things can launch their own inflammatory process. So first, let's get those under control. And second of all, the thing that we could all do, regardless of our health, is to achieve and maintain a healthy weight. You know, in neurology, carrying extra weight alone is inflammatory. But when you have a sort of a debilitating disease that may require that you have a caretaker help you, it may require that you have to transfer from a wheelchair to another seat or a toilet, that can be difficult. And so the closer we are to our healthy weight, then the easier those sort of life experiences become. And how you get there by following that balanced and varied diet that I mentioned. In addition to that, drinking water, getting plenty of water. With neurological diseases, a lot of times bladders are affected. Bowel health is something to be concerned about. And so rather than avoid water, we've got to drink plenty of it. And then one thing that I notice a lot in regards to fatigue is we can't skip meals. It's one of those things that seems very basic, like everyone would know that, but when you're the one skipping the meal, you don't really think about it that much. You've just developed the habit that you don't eat breakfast or you don't eat lunch. It's just the way it worked out. And then you find that you're sinking a few hours later and just getting a little slower or not quite as energetic. Have meals throughout the day, and if it's difficult to start eating a meal that you've skipped for years, you can start slow. Start with some fruit. Have a yogurt, something small. Over time, you'll want that food, and you'll likely find that your fatigue has decreased as well. Mm-hmm. And there's also a ton of things we can do, foods at least, that we should eat to help control inflammation or avoid because we know that they're pro-inflammatory.
Yeah. You get to this point of weight management is very important for, general health, and these disease processes can render people immobile many times, and which can lead to inactivity and weight gain. So as a follow-up question to that, I think people think, I need to lose weight, so I have to exercise. But wait, I can't do a lot of, aerobic exercises and things to lose weight. Can I really get to a healthy weight just through diet? Is that a concern that is valid?
So I would argue that probably there are exercises that you can do. Even, there are seated exercises for those who are confined to wheelchairs. Pool exercises, walking in the pool. Swimming is great. If you can't swim, walking is fine. But at any rate, do what you can. Any increased movement is good for increasing your calorie needs, which then helps with weight loss. It's also good for maintaining any function that you currently have. Stretches are great for that. But yeah, exercise is doable. If you can't exercise for some reason, then there are definitely, we all have things we can improve in our diet. So there are improvements that can be made there. Some people may find it difficult to lose weight just through diet, but that's why, I mean, you should see a dietitian and get some help with that.
Chris, from the pediatric side, I know that, you know, kind of globally, at least in the United States, there's a lot of conversation and concern about, you know, the increased weight of our children, the obesity epidemic in our kids. Can you speak maybe a little to the way that affects kids with these different disorders, with different neurological diseases, and any concerns from the weight standpoint with children?
Yes, of course. So like Tad said, with increased body weight, or more precisely increased body fat, inflammation does go up. Adipose tissue does produce inflammatory markers, so that would aggravate the inflammation state. And also on top of that, with excess body weight, not only comes in more inflammation, but the risk for other diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and high cholesterol, which is just add to our current situation that some of the kids are on at the moment. As far as for weight management, it goes along with what Tad said. Exercise is important, and if you can do something, do what you can. The benefits, of course, are mobility, muscle mass. You will produce more muscle mass, which in turn will help you burn more calories. But the main thing is trying to get the kids out of the comfort zone and start to do a little bit of more mobility and watching exactly what they eat, not just focusing on the sweets or the carbs, because most of the kids that I see are typically eating diets that are fairly high in carbohydrates. I would say maybe at least 60% of their diet is probably carbs. So I definitely try to focus on reducing the carb amount as well as limiting some of their calories while promoting some physical activity.
Yeah, I think a lot of us just really need to be more conscious of what we're eating. I think if you ask most people, myself included, you know, what did you eat yesterday, or what is your normal diet? I wouldn't necessarily be able to tell you everything that I eat all the time, but it's kind of being conscious of what you're eating and why you're eating it. There's some questions came in. There's a question that came in now live that I think kind of speaks to a lot of the questions that came in. I've been on a gluten-free diet since my diagnosis of NMO in 2015. I try to be as paleo as possible too. At this time, my symptoms have resolved. Do you recommend this type of diet? Now, I think that there's, you know, especially nowadays, there's a lot of fad diets out there and concern and conversations about gluten and dairy and very specific kind of vegan or paleo kind of diets. And anecdotally, you hear patients who say, oh, I did this, I took this out of my diet, or I supplemented with this, and I feel a lot better. Can you guys speak to either, you know, these particular concerns, especially maybe gluten or something along those lines? And are there any specific dietary recommendations, especially from a pro or anti-inflammatory diet standpoint? And any thoughts as to, especially if there's any scientific evidence out there about any validity to specific diets or supplementation?
Sure. Chris, do you want?
Oh, did you want to start, or do you want me to?
Sure,
start?
I can. Yeah. So you mentioned paleo and gluten-free and the other sort of popular diets, and unfortunately, the evidence isn't that strong supporting any of those. However, I would say if you saw an improvement after following a diet, continue to do that. You know, if it's working for you, then keep doing it if it's not too difficult. However, regarding, I mean, paleo and gluten-free in particular, there are some things that you should probably watch for. You should definitely be taking a multivitamin if you're doing those. Any diet that rules out entire food groups or large parts of food groups, you're likely missing some nutrients. And particularly gluten-free. Because what a lot of people will do is they'll start their gluten-free journey by getting rid of bread from their diet. Well, they may not realize that our bread supply has been fortified for many years with a lot of vitamins and minerals that you're now not getting. And so definitely start a multivitamin. What was the rest of your question? Oh, inflammation. What to do for inflammation with diet?
Yeah. Are there any dietary recommendations about anti-inflammatory diets?
Yeah. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of diet information in the scientific literature that's focused specifically on TM, but there is some that's focused on neuromuscular diseases in general and the notion of inflammation. And there was actually a really good review put out in American Society for Neurochemistry in January or so of 2015 that talked about diet inflammation. And so what I can give you here, I'll give you now sort of their list of things that they'd recommend, and I think everyone will agree with all of them, but starting with increasing fruits and vegetables. So fruits and vegetables naturally have a lot of antioxidants in them, so that's beneficial. Decreasing your intake of saturated animal fat, and if you're thinking of animal fat, what's saturated? It's anything that you could see at room temperature as solid, so like butter or the rind on a steak, that sort of marbling in a steak. Avoiding trans fats. Trans fats are inflammatory. They're being removed from the diet or from the food supply, but you should consciously look at labels and make sure you're not consuming any of them. Limiting the consumption of red meat. This is a recommendation that's pretty much made for everyone. So this is sort of the genesis of Meatless Mondays that people started a while back. Avoiding sugar-sweetened drinks. Chris mentioned that about children, and absolutely, if you can start that habit at a young age or prevent the habit of drinking them from forming at a young age, it makes it much easier to move into adulthood with better habits. Similarly, avoiding hypercaloric meals, so overeating. Just the process of getting too many calories at once is inflammatory. You can decrease dietary sodium, another thing that most all of us should do, and I think most people would be surprised to know that the majority of the sodium we get in our diet doesn't come from a salt shaker. It comes from processed foods and ingredients that are in sort of the store-bought convenience items. And then lastly, avoiding cow's milk. Oddly, there's a tiny protein in cow's milk fat that, I'm sorry, did I say cow's milk? I meant avoiding cow's milk fat. So drinking skim milk will prevent you from consuming that particular protein and help decrease inflammation.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of generally good information.
It's all generally good. And then another thing you can do is sort of that we don't really talk that much about you don't hear it a lot in people's discussion of nutrition, but lifestyle choices. If you think about sort of what you can control in your health is going to be determined by, your environment, your genes, and then your lifestyle. Well, your genes have been set. Your environment, depending on your age, may have been set, but your lifestyle choices are your decisions. So whether you drink too much or smoke or do drugs or exercise or not, those are all things that, not drinking, not smoking, do exercise. These are things that will help decrease inflammation systemically.
Yeah, and Chris, from your experience working with kids, I know your background has been working, or your interest and experience with the ketogenic diet, and knowing how the ketogenic diet can work with children with seizure disorders. Do you have anything to add to what Tad was saying about children with neurological disorders, specifically inflammatory neurological disorders, if you can speak to that, based on your experience with different diets?
Yes, definitely. So just want to add to what Tad said. As far as for inflammation, diets for inflammation, the main things that I've noticed in the articles that I've looked up is calorie restriction, increase in vegetables, and sometimes even vitamin D supplementation. Like Tad said, with the vegetables, we get more antioxidants, but we also get fiber. And fiber is very important for the gut bacteria. I know that's something that they're looking into now as far as how it affects some of the inflammation that we see. But in addition to antioxidants, we get to provide a good, healthy gut bacteria. Vitamin D supplementation has also been seen. It shows that most people are pretty low with vitamin D, or they're low in their vitamin D. So supplementation with that has seemed to be something of topic. See how it helps. As far as for the ketogenic diet, that's something that's coming along with not only seizure disorders, but also autism and even MS as well. They're trying to see how the ketones that we produce when we're on the diet might somehow affect the genetic makeup of the mitochondria, or affect how the mitochondria works. They're trying to see if any defects in the mitochondria can lead to some of the demyelination that they see with some of the diseases. It's nothing detailed yet, but it's something that people are starting to look at. So we don't have any really good recommendations as far as for diseases with inflammation, as far as how it will work at this moment.
Yeah, there was some questions came in specifically about the ketogenic diet, and I think at least from my reading, that's probably one of the most well described specific diets specifically for seizure disorders. Could you, Chris, kind of dive into a little bit more about what the ketogenic diet is and why you said a little bit about why it works, but to give a layperson view of what that means?
Definitely. So a true ketogenic diet, and when I mean true, it's a diet that's 90% fat. Some of the diets out there that are said to be ketogenic are more of a modified Atkins, which is just a lower carb amount, typically maybe 20 grams a day. But a true ketogenic diet is 90% fat. It's actually a very difficult diet to follow, and it needs to be monitored by professionals for labs, in case they're becoming too acidotic, making sure that their BOH, their beta hydroxybutyrate, is not too elevated, and that's how we measure ketones in the blood. But basically, with the ketogenic diet, we pretty much try to mimic starvation mode. We eliminate carbs, we provide enough protein just to meet the DRI. By eliminating the carbs, we switch our fuel to fat. Now, fat's going to produce ketones, which is another fuel source for our body. Our body prefers carbs, but when it doesn't have carbs, it goes for ketones. Now, why are ketones important? Well, ketones are able to cross the blood-brain barrier, and the brain can use this for energy. Now, exactly how it works for seizure control, that's what people are looking into. A lot of the talks are how it affects the mitochondria, or it can have some effects on the genetic makeup of certain cells as far as the ketones go. But with the diet, there also are some complications that we might see. One of them is typically constipation. Again, it's a very high-fat diet, low fiber. Constipation will occur. And the other one that we look out for is acidosis. Acidosis is when there's too many ketones in the blood, and it drops your pH, which is not good for your body. Typically, that occurs due to poor hydration, or sometimes kids just really take to the diet and become very ketotic very fast. So those are the two main complications that we see. Again, with the ketogenic diet, it's a high-fat diet. So other possible complications are kidney stones. And for this reason, a true ketogenic diet really needs to be monitored by a professional. A modified Atkins is more doable at home.
Yeah, it's one of those things, don't try this at home kind of thing. And I think that kind of speaks to, like Tad was saying before, if you're going to be attempting a diet that either takes out whole food groups or focuses entirely on one, even if it's of course, this ketogenic diet is kind of the end of the spectrum, the far end of the spectrum. Yes. You have to be thinking about, what you're not getting that your body needs, and supplementation. And it kind of moves into some other questions that came in, kind of specifically about dietary supplementation. Chris, you mentioned vitamin D. And there's a lot of evidence out there about vitamin D in multiple sclerosis. And so I'm wondering if you guys can speak a little bit to, I guess, one, the role of vitamin D from a diet standpoint in particular, and then is there any other evidence to any other specific supplements, vitamins, minerals, etc., that have been shown or even might potentially have a beneficial effect on inflammatory disease processes. Tad, can you speak to that for a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I'll tell you, you're right. There's a lot of information about vitamin D and MS, and consequently, I mean, vitamin D is generally managed medically by the physician whenever we're in clinic. So I'm not often recommending vitamin D because I feel like the doctors are watching this. But yeah, I mean, most people are producing their own vitamin D from sunlight or getting it from dietary intake. But there's so aside from vitamin D, there's other things. You know, fish oil is you know, a nice omega-3 fish oil has been shown to decrease inflammation. It's anti-inflammatory. It's also, at least with MS, has been documented in reducing relapses. Alpha lipoic acid is another supplement that I find I see a lot of patients are taking, and that is generally done for its immunomodulatory effect and anti-inflammatory properties. Honestly, if your disease has touched your bladder, my recommendation is that you take a cranberry extract daily or drink cranberry juice. You may not think of that as a supplement, but it is, and it can be beneficial in reducing urinary tract infections. Other popular supplements might be things like turmeric, ginkgo biloba. There's been a study, at least, that showed that it has somewhat helped with fatigue. CoQ10 is a common supplement that people will take. It's actually a coenzyme that your body uses in the production of energy, and it's been shown to help improve fatigue and even depression.
And Chris, is there anything that you want to add to that list, or any other thoughts, again, from the pediatric standpoint? Understanding that, you know, kids, you know, when you're talking about a 3-year-old versus a 10-year-old, that they have different needs in and of themselves in that time span. From a diet standpoint, can you speak to any specific needs of children in terms of diet supplementation?
Definitely. So like Tad said, in our clinic as well, vitamin D is always managed by the physician, and they always provide the amount to give. But what we see is that for the most part, most kids are low, and it's typically kids who are overweight or have extra weight on them. Now, why it's low, it's you know, could be, you know, diet intake, or maybe the increased amount of adipose tissue might cause more of it to be stored. You know, it could be multifactorial. But, you know, some of the benefits of vitamin D is, you know, of course, we think bone health is the main one. But, you know, it also acts as a signal pathway for cell communication, or at least initiates the start for that. And there are some genomic effects. So basically, the vitamin D can go into the cell, into the nucleus, and act as a hormone and potentially, you know, affect transcription transcription of certain genes. Now, how it affects MS in that sense, I don't know. That's as far as I go into it. But for the most part, that's something that we see with the kids, not just with MS, but just in general. Typically, when extra weight is seen, vitamin D is typically low, whether they're taking enough dairy in or not. As for the urinary tract infection, the only other thing I would like to add to that is blueberry. It's another one that can go hand in hand with cranberry. I know that one helps get rid of the bacteria, and the other one helps prevent the bacteria from adhering. So when taken together, I think it has a better effect.
Yeah, and I think it's important because this comes up a lot in our clinic when we talk about cranberry supplementation. If you're going to drink cranberry juice, make sure that it's 100% cranberry juice and not cranberry cocktail that's filled with sugar. I think people will make that mistake sometimes accidentally. There was a question that came in that I think was a little bit more specific that maybe you guys can speak to. In the case that many times our patients, when they're struck with, you know, a spinal cord injury, spinal cord attack of transverse myelitis, and then they move into a rehab unit, an inpatient kind of intensive rehab unit. I think people think a lot about the PT aspect of it, but not many people think about, during the course of PT, is there anything to think about from the diet standpoint in terms of helping support the physical activity that they'll need to undergo through a therapeutic standpoint, while in a therapeutic way, and to think about the nutrition that's needed to help move that along. Is that something to think about, or does it make much of a difference? Tad?
Listen, you're talking to a dietitian. I think it's always something to think about. but it should be kept in mind that physical therapy is going to increase your calorie needs. You're actually exercising for longer periods of time. So, if you are already a healthy weight, know that you'll need to, make up those calories, or you'll likely lose weight. If you are, if you need to lose weight, I would say probably, don't get hungry. But if you're burning more calories, that can be a good thing, and it can also help you in your process of achieving a healthy weight. And again, I'll mention water and hydration. Especially if your PT is going to have you sweating, and or even just have you more active than you typically are, stay hydrated. Those are definitely things to be concerned about.
Yeah. And then also kind of moving a little bit from that, many times our patients, if they're immobile and will get pressure sores or some kind of wound that might have trouble healing. And I'm wondering if you guys can speak a little bit to the benefits of diet during the healing process of wounds and things of that nature.
Yes, so I can start, Ted. So the main things that we look for, we try to do when we see ulcers or trying to treat them, is definitely adequate protein intake, making sure they get enough protein to meet their DRI, or sometimes extra, depending on their age group, we'll bump it up a bit. And also vitamin C and fluids, of course. Depending on how much or how deep it is, they could potentially lose more fluids. And also vitamin C helps with the repair, helps with collagen repair. So that's another supplement that we try to add to their diet.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree with Chris on all of that. I mean, and then maybe even go a little further and discuss with the patient the benefits of shifting your weight hourly to make sure that you're not putting too much pressure on one spot for any length of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's all very important. That comes up definitely from time to time, especially with the patients who are paralyzed from the waist down or something along those lines. One thing I'm glad that we were able to have both of you on from both the pediatric and the adult side, because I think an important thing for us to keep in mind is kind of the lifespan dietary needs, and what children need are different from what adults need. And also, as we move into more of the geriatric phase of life, the later life, as needs change. So I think what might be helpful is if you guys could just speak a little bit more to the specific needs. I think, if you're a parent with a child, especially one who has a neurologic disorder like the ones that we work with, you're thinking so much about all the things that we can do to help them, but remembering, the different needs of children through the course of their childhood, from a diet standpoint, and then moving into adulthood. Could you guys speak to that a little bit deeper as to the differences between what one should be thinking about in childhood versus adulthood?
Yes, I can go ahead and start with childhood, and then we can go to adulthood. So with the children, I mean, the main thing is, at a young age, they are going to need more calories. The amount of calories will also depend also on their activity and whether they're going to hit growth spurts or not. Now, the one thing that I always tell parents is let the kid feel his hunger. If he's hungry, let him eat offer healthy foods. Don't force them to eat. That can definitely start some bad habits later on to where they need to finish everything when they're not really that hungry. Hydration is also important, whether it be a young kid or an adult. Hydration is one of the biggest issues we see here, typically because kids will prefer to drink juice or soda rather than water. I always recommend parents to offer water. They can mix a little bit of flavoring to it if they want, but the main thing is to get that habit started. Now, I prefer water, but if we need to add some flavor to it, I prefer that over a juice or a soda. As a kid, I believe that juice is really not needed. If they're wanting to drink an apple juice, I prefer them to eat an apple. Not only will they get the juice and the flavor from the apple, but they also get fiber and more vitamins and minerals than just from the juice. Setting a proper meal plan is also important. Letting them know that there are 3 meals, 1 or 2 snacks is fine, but we definitely don't want them to graze all day on snacks. That's something I see that's pretty common with the kids. They'll walk in with a bag of chips or drink some soda while they're waiting or while they're just walking in. And I definitely recommend parents to stay away from that. Don't let them graze. Set meal times, set snack times. Avoid that habit. And then something that else is pretty common is with most of my families too, there's for some reason a popularity with a bedtime meal, typically a bowl of cereal or some pastries right before bed. I always try to tell them to avoid that. Not only is that very high in calories, but also they're going to bed, they're going to store that weight, and their weight's just going to keep going up. Vitamins and minerals that I focus on typically are your calcium, vitamin D, phosphorus, and zinc. Zinc is important for growth as well, so that's probably the top ones I look for. I always recommend a multivitamin just in general because most kids aren't getting a balanced meal.
Mm-hmm. And then Tad, can you speak to kind of the transition from the growing, developing child into more of the mature adult, and you spoke before about general health and diet, but kind of through the adult lifespan, especially as we move into the geriatric phase of life, how dietary needs change, or especially differences between men and women and things of that nature.
Sure. So the hope is that by the time you've reached adulthood, Chris has taught you really good habits, good dietary habits. And so, if as a typical adult, if you're eating a good balanced and varied diet, like I discussed earlier, staying hydrated, getting some regular exercise, then you're probably fine. Though, if you've chosen a diet that cuts out entire food groups, if you have a certain disdain for a certain type of food and just won't eat it, then you may also need a multivitamin, and that's fine. You can just start that. But really, where we start to see the challenges are if you move into sort of older age without those habits, then it may be more difficult to change the habits. But even worse, it's going to be hard to lose weight. So if you go into older age with extra weight, it's going to be harder to get that off than it used to be for a couple of reasons. One, you just need fewer calories. Your body, as you get older, loses muscle mass. Like Chris said earlier, muscle mass will have a higher calorie requirement than other tissue. And so as you lose that mass, then you now need fewer calories. Well, if you need fewer calories, you have to eat less than you need in order to lose weight. So at some point, it just becomes really difficult to lose that weight. Add to that movement gets more difficult as we get older and more infirm, then it's even harder then to get regular exercise. So those things just make it all the more important to develop, good, healthy nutritional habits early in life and take them with you all the way through. Regarding men and women, pre-menopause, women will need more iron. Post-menopause, not so much. So know too that as you add things like iron supplementation to your diet, you may experience constipation with that, which is another nutritional concern, one that you would likely want to work on with your dietitian.
Mm-hmm. You guys talk about, I guess we we here in Dallas, you guys work with us and are great, and we have access to you guys as dietitians in our medical center here. But I think there are a lot of patients out there who have these disorders, TM and NMO and ADEM, are in places where there might not be this kind of professional dietitian available, kind of at the fingertips of their physicians, their providers, or even for the patient. Do you have any resources that you would recommend to people who might not have access to a professional dietitian to help kind of plan and educate them about diet?
Sure. I would say that use the association websites. They have a lot of good information, like, for instance, MDA's website, Muscular Dystrophy Association. They've got some good resources, as does the National MS Society, myelitis.org. A lot of these disease-specific associations and societies will have information that may be difficult to find because their population is looking for it. Eatright.org is a great place to go for general diet information. And then oftentimes, Sam, what I see is a lot of people who maybe they know what to do, but don't really know how to cook or how to prepare food. I spend a lot of time sending people to websites where they can find recipes and snack ideas that are healthy, easy to do. And I'll tell you, for fun, I tell people to take a cooking class. That's not a resource about this in particular, but if you don't know how to cook, take a cooking class. It's fun, and there is no way to eat super healthy and eat out. You need to be eating at home and preparing your own foods from scratch.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind here. It's, I think it's the 21st century, and we have information at our fingertips, and we can know, the most cutting edge information about what's proper diet and how to do all of this. But if you don't know how to cook or don't have those resources, then it doesn't help very much. So I think that's something that gets neglected a lot of the times in these kinds of conversations about diet, and I think we as people tend to err on the side of, well, the dietitian will tell me what to eat, or they'll tell me what to do, and there's a certain we all as individuals, not solely as individuals with diseases, but just as healthy as people in general who are living day to day, have to take some ownership in making our food and finding the food that we need to eat and being conscious of it, and starting young. I think it's like Chris was saying, getting those habits set early will really define the way that human as an adult will live their life, and it's a lot harder to change habits the older you get, the more ingrained that they are. So I think that's very important to hit on.
Sure, and I would even say that if in discussing cooking your own foods, I hear sometimes that my dominant hand is spastic and I'm not able to chop or prepare or whatever the task may be. Look into adaptive devices. There are cutting boards that will hold your vegetable for you while you cut it. There are knives that you don't have to be so accurate with. They're rocker knives and go back and forth. And there's all kinds of utensils and adaptive devices available. If you know to look for them, that might make your ability to cook even better or easier.
And if I could add to that, also keeping it simple at first. For those that are just going to start out, don't try to do too much at once. Definitely make small steps and simple goals, whether it be just as simple as starting to add more vegetables to your meal. Half the plate, vegetables, whatever vegetable you would like, will be a step in the right direction. Sometimes I feel like people try to do too much at once, and that's when they get burnt out, especially when they're starting out.
Yeah, I just from my own experience, I'm certainly not a cook. But when I do cook, it does have to be very simple. And one of my favorite meals that I make myself is just a salmon fillet and some chopped up Brussels sprouts. I just salt and pepper it all and throw it in the oven for about 10 minutes, and then I have a meal. And it's just the time when I feel the most healthy, when I can do something like that. But it's very simple, and in my experience, that's very helpful to me. So I think that's an important point, Chris, especially starting out, is to just think of what's something simple and easy and healthy, because it doesn't have to be complicated to be healthy.
That's right. Exactly.
So we're moving into the later part of the hour. I wanted to kind of throw it back at you guys a little bit as we slow down here, to kind of give us your basic takeaways from the talk today. The basic overview of what are the main points of someone who's living with TM or NMO or other rare inflammatory diseases, neurological diseases, about diet and nutrition, how they can incorporate it into their lives, what are things to think about in terms of their diet, both from the pediatric and the adult standpoint. Just some takeaway points for the hour. Tad, would you like to start?
Sure. So, I guess the first thing I would say is achieve and maintain a healthy weight. So if you're overweight, get with someone, join Weight Watchers is a great program to help with that. If you can't get to a dietitian, if you aren't able to see a professional, Weight Watchers is great. But achieve and maintain a healthy weight, and stay hydrated. Drink plenty of water. If you've got a bladder concern, urgency, or retention, or any sort of problems with your bladder, what we have to do is find the way around that. We've got to figure out, how do we still get enough water into you so that you stay hydrated and stay healthy, and still accommodate sort of the special situation that the bladder problems may create. As you're working to get to your healthy weight, do so with a broad and varied diet. Eat a lot of colors, eat a lot of textures, try different things. I had a lady tell me the other day, I don't like asparagus, but I've never had it. And so, how do you know you don't like asparagus? So, it's very easy to sort of fall into the things we've always done because that's what we like. But challenge your beliefs around food. Maybe you decided you didn't like asparagus when you were 11, but you're 45 now. Try it again. Try it with something on it, a little Parmesan cheese or something that changes the flavor for you, something to get excited about. But try to eat a lot of different fruits and vegetables. And then as far as grains go, make sure you're getting whole grains. Maybe make it your habit to have whole grain bread at home and whole grain cereals and whole grain pastas, and you don't do white breads at home. Or white grains. Maybe that's the rule. If you just really love them, you can have them when you go out to eat, but when you eat at home, try to make them all whole grains. Whatever gets that change implemented for you. And then finally, I would say that most of us should be incorporating pre and probiotics into our diet. Chris spoke earlier about the benefits of fiber with your gut biome. I would say that if you don't eat yogurt, or if you do eat yogurt but you don't eat it regularly, try eating it regularly. That's beneficial to your gut. Increased fiber is as well. And if you've never taken and you're interested, you should maybe try a probiotic. I find those in clinic at least to be quite useful for people who have concerns with their bowels.
Thanks, Tad. And Chris, what are your final thoughts?
Similar along with Tad, pretty much everything we said was spot on. I would also focus on portion control, making sure that, the biggest portion of our plate is in our starches. Like Tad said, definitely go for whole wheat, but you still don't want to make the biggest part of your plate nothing but pasta or nothing but potatoes. The biggest portion always wants to be, you always want to make it the vegetables and keep them colorful. And hydration, I will stress that again too. Hydration is very important. A lot of us take it for granted. An easy trick to get a little bit more water in and work on our portions is always drink a cup of water before your meal, during your meal, and after your meal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the big takeaway from me from all of these today and from other conversations that I've had about nutrition is, especially when it comes to these kinds of disorders, it's not necessarily one size fits all. There's not eat this, don't eat this kind of answer that we all wish that there were sometimes. And there's not a lot of studies and scientific data out there about these particular disorders and what to do. There's a lot of new research going into it, and hopefully that will be there will be some more clear answers in the future. But right now, I think it's very important that the takeaway be the broad, healthy eating, healthy lifestyles, hydration, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean meats, varied diet is important for everybody, and no different for people with these kind of inflammatory neurologic disorders. And if you have a diet and it works for you, like you said earlier, Tad, it makes you feel better, and it's sustainable, then that's great. Go for it. But remember that that same thing might not work for the neighbor next door. I think that's very important for us to remember. So I want to thank you guys, Tad and Chris, a lot for your time and your energies today, your expertise to the community. I want to thank all of the listeners, everybody who was there to hear this, and all of your questions, and to the TMA for this platform to educate people. So hope everybody has a great week. Thanks again, Tad and Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.